to Investors Hangout once again. Fixed income fund investors had a very anxious time, and to discuss how it evolved, what happened, how people should deal with it, and what is in store for us. I'm going to discuss all this with Manish Jangi, who looks after all the fixed income investments at Birla Sun Life Asset Management. Welcome, Manish.
Thank you. Thank you.
I have, we have been doing this Investors Hangout for a while now, for a few years now, and this is quite special, at a very special occasion when people have, we are enamored with a number of questions on fixed income from fixed income investors, even the people who had very small allocation to fixed income or they were contemplating. We have never seen this scale of anxiety. So first I'll put forward my questions to you, and then I'll follow it up with, our investors' question on generally. I'm not going to get very specific on, very micro on many of the issues, many of specific to a fund, but generally in terms of understanding what is in store, how it evolved, what happened, and what we should expect. So first and foremost, debt market, we know, witnessed significant liquidity constraints, and during the period of this lockdown, which was a completely unanticipated. When do you see some order getting restored?
The new world order. I mean, who knows? Basically, we know very little of this virus right now, and very, very little in terms of the catastrophe it is creating for the world economy and Indian economy. But we have some old templates. We've seen pandemics in the world. We had Spanish flu. We had pandemics in 1958 and 68, both across the world. And we realized this that it sort of takes a couple of quarters for the population to get accustomed to the new reality, and life moves on. So if you think if the order means as to how we all used to go to the markets and buy stuff for ourselves, go to offices, I think you would see a semblance of in some sense something that we used to do would be with us in next few months, 2 to 3 months. Why? Because we understand that across the globe there is this growing consensus that locking down the economies and societies for very long is not necessarily the best solution to it. So I guess firstly the economies have to sort of open up, and then resultantly the stress that we are seeing right now across financial markets, I hope with a reasonable amount of backstops coming in from central banks and other policymakers would ensure that we sort of begin to see some normalization of stuff. Left to themselves, the markets and the credit businesses and consumers would actually quite misbehave, and left to themselves, it's very likely that we would see a very depressive conditions in our economy and world economy. But then that's the good thing that people understand. The policymakers understand, and they are sort of going to backstop the.
Is it any better than it was in March or April?
March of 2020. Are we any better? Is what you're saying?
Has the situation in the market, the dynamics, the liquidity, has it improved a little bit?
Yeah, it has. It has, in a sense, at least to a certain section of economy, the access to finance has improved. The yields have come off, of course, in the sovereign and the adjacent curves like PSU bonds and some of the good AAA private bonds. So to that extent, the monetary easing is beginning to trickle and access to finance is improving. Yet it would be unfair to say that it's any better for stressed companies or companies which could have been in stress because of COVID-19. So in a sense, the answer is somewhat mixed here. It has improved for a certain section of economy quite substantially, whereas its effects, the monetary policy easing and fiscal policy easing is yet to take any effect on relatively distressed corporates. So its answer to that is, that the financial conditions remain extraordinarily tight in India for far curves, for the A curves and triple B curves and the long end of the curve. But financial conditions have eased quite substantially on the lower end of the curve, as well as basically the sovereign and the AAA bonds.
Uh, how much was the announcement by RBI particularly specific to mutual funds, providing a liquidity window? How much was it helpful?
I mean, I think it's a misunderstanding that, MFs need liquidity, in terms of meeting their redemptions. I mean, no fund house would ever borrow money to meet the redemptions if the money is going or leaving the fund house for good. It's only for liquid funds, for the quarter end or the month ends, when money leaves. Some of us actually resort to borrowing for 1 or 2 days or 3 days, so that because we all know that the money would come back. But the stress has been in the credit markets and credit funds, and there is absolutely no business for us to borrow money. If investors are leaving us, we ought to be able to create liquidity by selling securities. And so to that extent, I mean, it has telegraphed a message that central bankers are ready to do anything, whatever it takes, even for mutual funds, which are not regulated by them. But in the real effectiveness from the point of view of our ability to borrow money from banks and RBI and give it to people who are leaving us, I think, I don't think, barring 1 or 2 fund houses would have actually borrowed money.
So it was not a very meaningful solution to the problem that you're facing.
Not in the no. First, see, there are three levels here. One is the problem that we are facing. Of course, is the investors deserting credit funds. Okay, now in the credit funds, the business of borrowing actually does not exist. We ought to sell securities and liquidate them. We also saw a Franklin episode where they came to a point where they ran out of liquidity, and they could not run. They could not, let people redeem, without borrowing, and therefore they actually chose another option, which is the more malignant one, which is to shut down the funds. So borrowing actually was never a solution, even for Franklin. They did borrow for briefly, but they realized that it was not the right thing to do. So I mean, the problem exists in the credit fund side, and the borrowing is not a solution to it. The solution there is either market gives us an exit, which is banks and non-bank companies or special purpose vehicles set up by the government actually buy the assets, the good assets from mutual funds. So that's one solution. Or the roundabout good solution is, of course, that transfer, lot of fiscal transfer should happen so that actual credit conditions improve. So in any case, things will begin to improve dramatically. Those are the solutions. The borrowing is not a solution. That's one. Number two is that despite large outflows, no other fund actually or fund house came close to a point of shutdown. So that essentially means that after the IL&FS, all of us got an opportunity to create enough liquidity in the system and in the fund, so that an eventual outcome like Franklin shutdown that would result in a run on all of us still would not result in us in shutting down. So to that extent, MFs were much better prepared today to sort of meet all sorts of redemptions.
Created a great degree of preparedness among you.
That's true. This crisis, by the way, has been going on since September of 2018, and so therefore it's a fairly old crisis. And of course has allowed MFs to sort of create enormous liquidity within themselves and reduce the overall credit stress across the funds, including in the credit funds, by the way, and which is the reason why no one else faced the stress that Franklin faced.
Fixed income market in India, or maybe good part of the world, is not as liquid, and more so at the most inopportune time. So how much role have the valuation norms and rules around that in terms of write down, or the way the way the regulators actually, because it goes about liquefying something which is otherwise illiquid. So has it really, exacerbated this whole situation, and it has actually precipitated the whole situation, the valuation norms and the rules? Has it
No,
been a
fixed income markets, by the way, are of course more liquid than equities, across the curve, and so let's say a counterpart of a Nifty will be government bond, and which is very liquid. A counterpart of, rest of the, let's say Nifty next will be what you call AAA bonds, which are much more liquid than Nifty next. And a counterpart of a mid cap will be AA securities, which are far more liquid than mid caps. And a counterpart of a small cap is A rated, which is absolutely more liquid than a small cap. So let's get this right first. That fixed income is far more liquid. Liquid does not mean the amount of securities which trade every day. Liquid means the impact cost, and the impact cost for fixed income security, a AA or A rated security, is not as significant as mid cap and small cap stocks are. That's one. Number two,
feature, because the fixed income comes with some kind of framework that you can earn only as much, so that's the nature of the underlying.
no, that's true for even equity. I mean, though you have some impressions of you could make infinite returns, but the fact of the matter is that equity only delivers some risk premia, equity risk premia, which is in distressed times like these, it's 8%, and in bubbly times, if you invest, it's barely anything. So equity earns let's say 6% over gilt, and credit earns about 2% over gilt, and that's about it. It's just that the equities distribution of returns are uneven, meaning it tends to be 40% once in a while, in a decade, and it also tends to be minus 50% once in a decade. The kind of drawdowns, even in a credit, is not as substantial. You tend to have some drawdowns once in a while, but the upside is of course capped to 5-6%. So
No,
because most likely over next 1 year you will see a reasonable upside because the credit spreads will come down, but that would be only 5-6% maybe over gilt. But in bad times, it could be 5-10% drawdowns. But so in a sense, fixed. First, let's get two things right. One is of course that the expected return in equity or the equity risk premia is not infinite. It is anchored to base curves. Okay, and two is that the assumption that equity has symmetric lot of upside and lot of downside is because of the uneven nature of its return outcome. The return outcome for credit is actually a lot more even than equities.
Okay, now getting on to something very specific which most investors will be very anxious about. What to expect now? The rates are coming down, that low rate regime might continue or for a while. So, and then we will see what kind of crisis it eventually translates into, what kind of bankruptcy, what kind of downgrades that we see. And in that context, what should be a return expectation from an investor, and how should they go about dealing with it?
So, okay, I mean, basically, we've sort of coming to an end of a golden era of fixed income investing, contrary to the general perception that, fixed income has been in distress. There've been very few cumulatively 4-5 years when fixed income has done so well. Essentially nothing, because mostly because interest rates have come off quite sharply. In the 2014, from 9% on a 10-year bond, it's now 570, 75. So it's been a secular downturn in interest rates, which essentially result in superlative returns for people who are invested in long bonds, but also it sort of promises super low returns for the future. So essentially, I think by the end of 2020, you would have come down to remarkably low levels of interest rates, which this audience and you and I wouldn't have seen ever in India or anywhere in the world. Pretty much everywhere in the world, interest rates are being brought down to near zero. It's possible that Indian rates don't come down to zero, but it would be abysmally low, vis-a-vis what we all are used to. That's number one. Number two is that low interest rates actually telegraph you one very important message, that your future returns from fixed income are going to be somewhat lower than what you've experienced in the past, at least in the nominal terms. The third is that in near term, at least, because inflation is going to be super low, you know, even a 6% or 7% returns in fixed income is going to be very high real return. You know, in a sense, you know, it's very likely that the inflation in India will be about near zero. And if you earn about 7% in a reasonable fixed income fund, it's almost a 7% real spread. So while the nominal returns would look somewhat lower, yet, you know, the real returns are going to be one of the highest that you would have received in last generation. That's third. Number four is that, you know, it's very likely that the long-term returns of fixed income are going to be suppressed because this to way to solve the current economic malaise is to transfer income from a saver to a borrower. Okay, that's the trick right now central banks are up to, and which will mean that they continue to depress interest rates over next 12 or 18 months, which will mean that the saver would earn lesser and lesser returns for even its long-term commitment to fixed income, and so that some transfers of income can happen to the borrower. You understand that, you know, if you are borrowing, you had borrowed, let's say at 11% to buy your home, and you are in distress right now. The way to solve your problem is, you know, I bring down that 11% to 8%. But that's only possible if bank actually reduces the depositors' interest rates by only also 3%. So which is why, you know, most of us are going to face fixed deposit rates of 3-4% sooner than later. So which you haven't seen in India forever. At least, you know, in last 100 years, I haven't seen such kind of interest rates in India. So basically, these are the big tenets of, you know, fixed income markets. Super low interest rates already, but they're going to get lower from here. Long-term commitments are fixed income likely to earn you lower returns for very long term, which is why maybe it's a time to sort of go overweight risk assets, which is equity. But in near term, you will still earn a lot of high real returns, you know, which is a good news if you allocate your capital in right products. You know, don't invest your money in liquid fund because they're going to give you 3% return or even lower. If you want to earn a reasonable sort of nominal returns and real returns, you know, you have to sort of invest in right funds, you know, which won't give you very high nominal returns, but will give you reasonably good real returns.
How to deal with the fear around going beyond liquid fund today?
No, this overrated. You know, frankly, you know, I mean, it's the the problems in fixed income are exaggerated. You know, it ought to do with, you know, we ourselves, you know, because we don't telegraph this well, and of course, you know, media actually doesn't sort of give fixed income its due in terms of what they've done. You know, so I'll get to the answer of answering the liquid fund just in a while. But as a matter of fact, you know, in the midst of the worst credit crisis that India is experiencing since 1993, you know, there is very little amount of money which has been lost by fixed income fund managers collectively. On a 12-13 lakh crore of fixed income allocation, the total loss will not be more than 12,000 crores, which is about a percentage of the total AUM that we all manage in fixed income. No, is it good? No, of course not. You know, it's a terrible outcome for investors, you know, to have lost any money. But that's unfortunate part of any asset class, that, you know, if you get stuck in a bad asset class at a wrong point, you would lose money, and which is what has happened. It has happened to gilt funds, it has happened to small cap funds, it has happened to equity, it has happened to real estate, and now it has happened, of course, to the credit funds. Nonetheless, you know, collectively, even the worst asset class within fixed income, which is credit fund, you know, hasn't under delivered. You know, if you once you contextualize to the stress in the credit markets, you know, the 5-year credit fund returns of ours is about 7.5. You know, I mean, or 3-year returns will be 4.5, 5%. Now, is it good? Of course, it's terrible in terms of, you know, you've not got the risk premium that you assign to the credit fund, because liquid fund also gave us 7% return in last 5 years. Yet once you contextualize to, you know, credit crisis, you know, it's not bad. So that's on the broader industry. A liquid fund, by the way, you know, I mean, they completely, you know, there's absolutely little risk that's played out, not today, but in last 10 years. You know, I don't remember any 7-day period. I think briefly in 2013 for 1 week, you know, liquid funds gave negative return. Otherwise, liquid funds have not given negative return even if you invest for 1 week. So in a sense, there've been very few episodes of liquid funds misbehaving. And the same has happened over last 1 year also. Liquid funds would have delivered far better than your friendly neighborhood bank in fixed deposits.
Liquid funds had an impeccable track record till IL&FS hit them, some of them. What about, what is your advice to a long-term fixed income investor, a retiree? How should he go about, allocating his fixed income money today?
It's about timing. If you want, money back in a month's time, of course, it's liquid fund, which no other platform would do better than liquid fund.
My question is particularly about a person who is a long-term fixed income investor looking at moderate to, without assuming great risk, looking at steady, decent return from fixed income. How one should actually, go about conducting his investments?
I think the short-term fund space sort of fits the bill for a retiree or anyone who's looking at a regular income. In short-term funds, you have funds like corporate bond fund, banking PSU, and short-term fund itself. So these are the three choices one has, depending upon how risk averse are you. If you are extremely risk averse, then banking PSU is a place which invest only in banking securities and PSU bonds. So you're unlikely to meet with any credit accident there ever. You sort of loosen up a little bit of your standards, and you are fine with the AAA private bonds. Then it's the corporate bond fund. It would most probably earn you 40-50 basis point extra carry. You are ready to loosen up a little bit more, and then you want to get into AA plus, and you're fine with it. Then you will earn an additional 100 basis point carry by going to short-term funds. So I think a retiree could look at my advice for long-term investing. Short-term fund is a better place, and then maybe corporate bond fund, and then banking PSU.
Now, Manish, I'm moving on to our viewers' question, and quite a few of them, but we have chosen few. Anand Dhavale is asking, will there be an impact on debt-oriented hybrid funds due to redemption pressure and likely bond default due to pandemic? You will be responsible for the hybrid funds at your fund company?
Sorry?
You will be responsible for managing the debt allocation of the hybrid funds?
So Pranay Sinha manages, who is a fixed income fund manager. He also manages a gilt and income fund and banking PSU. So he manages the hybrid fund. And, every other fund house has a fixed income guy being allocated to manage the hybrid funds debt allocation. I don't think, across the board, when I see, hybrid funds have dialed the credit risk, which is exposed to credit event incrementally. So I'm making a general argument across the industry. It could happen in one or two cases, but in general, I don't think hybrid funds have securities which are likely to face default at this point in time.
Okay.
Now, in terms of liquidity, I guess the question comes from the popularization of this idea that credit funds have transferred security to hybrid funds. Now there are two steps to it. One, of course, is that we have a policy: we don't transfer non-AAA security and non-PSU security. So to that extent, we have not touched hybrid funds in transferring credit. But even the ones who've done it, actually, they won't actually make mistake of transferring a weak security. They could be lower rated, but they're not weak securities. And to that extent, I think it's a bit exaggerated that the credit risk is being transferred to hybrid funds.
Rajan is asking, just look at the tone of the questions. What is the future for debt funds? How will borrowers manage to repay on time in the current situation?
It's a legitimate question. If the economy shuts down for as long as one imagines, let's say already 80 days and more going, it is a legitimate crisis for all sorts of borrowers. Okay, even the good companies are starting to feel stress. Yet, this is precisely an environment we seek backstops from central banks and governments, and look at what US has done and UK has done. I think similar templates are going to be applied pretty much across the world. And my sense is that I think the COVID related bankruptcies will be minimized. So that's a overarching answer to this question. Number two, of course, is that you could have individual cases going belly up, but in general, I think governments and central banks are fairly sensitive in ensuring that the Chapter 11 for US or IBC cases in India do not materialize only because these borrowers were under duress. So a lot of money is being supplied to a lot of these corporates, and you'll have a lot of special purpose vehicles, coming in soon, which begin to sort of supply money to some of these corporates.
Another question. Avinash Sethi is asking, how can I select a safe and best debt fund in the current scenario? Best thing in the current scenario.
I sort of answered, the short-term funds, corporate bond fund, banking, PSU, pretty much across the industries are safe. Okay, these are overarching themes. It's possible that some short-term fund is running some credit risk, and to that extent, your advisor, maybe Value Research, does such a wonderful job in actually identifying and give them star rating. So I guess some research would be needed, but I think majority of short-term funds and corporate bond funds are well placed. Now, I would say that you do not want to sort of invest a lot of time in researching it. Then pick up a good corporate bond fund, because they're supposed to invest 80% of their money in AAA, and pretty much most corporate bond funds are invested in 90-95% AAA security. So they are very well placed to deal with any even a tail event in the credit markets.
One question which will be which will be representative of many people. Mr. S. Loknath is asking that I'm a retiree seeking return higher than bank deposit without losing the core corpus. I want to generate regular income for next 15 years. What are the options available for me?
I think, pretty much most of the short-term funds have delivered on a 3-year rolling basis, better returns than fixed deposits over last 2 decades. And I think,
some regular withdrawal too.
Come again?
The return is generated in a manner that it can support regular periodic withdrawal.
I guess so. Yeah, I think the drawdowns in short-term funds are not substantial. So I guess, you could withdraw and you could experience a regular income in short-term funds.
Okay, now this is getting back to basics. Sheila Nath Thakur is asking, what is a gilt fund? How are they different from ultra short duration funds? I think, that they need to do some reading. Is it safe to invest in gilt fund in the current scenario?
So gilt funds, from an asset allocation point of view, is it invests only in government securities. Most gilt funds are long-dated government securities. So of course they benefit when interest rates go down. Most gilt funds, like our gilt fund, would have delivered about 17% or 16 to 17% returns as of today in last 1 year. So, by the way, gilt funds have delivered better than equity in last 10 years. Our gilt fund would have delivered more than 9.5-10% return in last 10 years. So better than most equity funds. But that does not mean that you should dial gilt fund right now, because these are cyclical funds. They've done very well because interest rates have come down, and it's very likely that they'll do very well over next 1 year. But exiting these funds actually at appropriate time is important, because when interest rates begin to move up, these funds will actually create negative returns again. So basically, in terms of allocation, gilt fund invest in government bonds. They do very well when interest rates are going down. But again, when interest rates go up, they tend to misbehave. So as I said in the beginning, Dhiren, every asset class has a cycle, and gilt has had an absolutely tremendous cycle playing out for them for last 3, 4, 5 years, and which is why they've done wonderful job. Even in last 10 years, actually, the rates have actually broadly have come off, but gilt funds have actually delivered 9 to 10% returns. A reasonable gilt fund has delivered about 9 to 10% over last 10 years, better than equity. But this itself is not a suffice fact for you to begin to dial gilt funds. Be careful, because they tend to be volatile, especially when interest rates begin to go up.
Another question from Anand, which is, maybe it has been answered while we were talking initially. I have some money invested in credit risk fund which has fallen in value substantially. What should I do? Should I exit with whatever is left?
Okay, depends as to which fund. Let's say I'll talk about Birla's credit fund. In last 5 years, about 7.5% return. Last 3 years have been somewhat, depressed return. But I think given that we are valuing our securities at depressed valuation, as and when we solve the and resolve the issues on our credits, it's very likely that these returns will actually start to look very good even for 3 year cycle. So my sense is that investors who sort of end up staying in credit funds, which is actually not experiencing incremental credit stress. In our case, I can tell you that we aren't experiencing any incremental credit case, not only today but for last 12 months. It's very likely that these funds would deliver a very good return over next 1 year. It's very likely a reasonably placed credit funds would deliver the best return in fixed income over next 1 year. So I think you should stay if it's about Birla Credit Fund. In general, also, I would say that, barring couple of funds, majority of them actually don't have developing credit risk. And given that the spreads have blown up, it's very likely that, these funds will deliver very good returns over next 6 to 12 months time. So my general advice is to stay put to the credit funds that you're invested in. Remember that fund managers, unlike banks, tend to value securities very conservatively. So which is why your returns in credit funds right now across the board are understated. And once you get a window of calm in the economy and credit markets in 6 to 12 months, some of the losses that you've had actually will be recouped quite swiftly. Okay. So to that extent, just stay put.
Stay put. Okay. I still have a lot of questions. There is one question which I would like to answer, but before that, I would like to, one question which crosses my mind right now, that this whole crisis started in, the fixed income crisis started somewhere in October 2018. And then it was almost like an advanced warning signal. What all did you do to come to a state that, you had a far greater preparedness, and what, with hindsight, what are the things which you think you should have done but haven't done?
Look, the fixed income fund managers are somewhat unsung heroes. You would be amazed if you look at fixed income portfolios, not only of Birla, but an average portfolio, and look at the amount of risk which has been cut in the portfolios pretty much across the board. Our participation in real estate, infrastructure, as well as NBFCs have come off, in terms of our percentage of portfolio allocated to these sectors has come off dramatically. When I say dramatic, mean, something which was at 25% NBFC exposure, that's down to 17, 18%. Mm-hmm. The NBFCs which are in distress today, okay, in those companies, the fixed income as a whole had invested about 8% or 9% of their portfolio. That number has come down to less than 2% today. So in a sense, this over last 18 to 24 months, fixed income fund managers have cut risk almost secularly across sectors and companies which are sort of at margin building, have been building stress. Okay. So in some sense, where did all this risk go? All this risk, not because they defaulted to fund managers, but somehow this risk was parceled to some other economic intermediaries or banking intermediaries, So to that extent, since fixed income fund managers don't practice relationship banking, which is practiced by bankers, at appropriate time and the macro change, for us as well as many other fund houses, people could shave risk off the portfolio and respond to the crisis in an appropriate manner, so that, finally we could sort of conclude that the losses in the entire fixed income basket would not be more than 1% as of today of the total portfolio that we manage in the industry. And you space it out across 2018, 19 and 20, it's almost like a 25-30 basis point of a credit loss. Compare this with a bank, which is sitting on 14% gross NPA today. I mean, 9-10% gross NPA, potentially 4-5% NPA coming because of COVID, and add 7%, write-offs that they've done over last 5-6 years. So you sort of start to compare that, any other economic party, which is into the financial intermediation, for them, it's been a catastrophe or a disaster of sorts last 5 years of credit markets. I think the fixed income guys have actually been able to exit risk pretty much across the board. And I could say this for pretty much the whole industry. I think one or two parties, who sort of have struggled. Otherwise, pretty much across the industry has cut risk quite significantly and responded to this crisis very well.
So you don't think there is anything which you think you should have done any differently?
No, it's possible. Again, the learnings are many. In terms of what fund managers, should have done. But most learnings pertain to what wrong did we do in 2016 and 17. Okay. I think very little. I would say maybe some players you wouldn't have to shut down had they created the same liquidity that many of us have created. So to that extent, it's a view having gone wrong. It's not necessarily a sort of outrageous mistake. It's legitimate to have taken a view about 1.5 years ago that this crisis would not go on for so long. Mm-hmm. And had that view played out, maybe Franklin would have been the biggest winner. Mm-hmm. So that was let's say in hindsight at least, it was a wrong view. But generally speaking, in 2018-19, with hindsight, we know that most fund managers did a good job. Yet I have to admit that there are many mistakes fund managers committed, including us in 2016-17. The go-go years of credit markets. We should have had less concentration in our portfolio. Our exposure to relatively modern financiers, the new financiers should have been a lot less than we had.
Modern financiers?
Sorry, I didn't hear.
What do you mean by modern financiers?
No, I mean the sort of set of people who have come in, who have sprung up, especially after 2008. Remember that 2008 to 18 has been a bombastic sort of period for non-bank financiers and private banks. Essentially, this was a period, especially after 2013. PSU banks have been pretty much shut because of PCA, because of the fear of 3Cs and so on and so forth. And large space opened up, for the private financiers to come in. Mm-hmm. Now, those financiers, while one would argue were well managed, yet there were black sheeps amongst them. And I think maybe some of us should have been sort of cautious, backing them to the extent that we backed, in 2016 and 17. But yet, most of these financiers actually, when they came to a point of distress, most mutual fund managers have actually exited. I'll give you an example. Mm-hmm. Look at Dewan Housing, which actually now is a case where, it's gone down and defaulted. At peak in 2017-18, mutual fund industry had 35,000, 40,000 crore exposure. And, when it defaulted, a couple of months out, the total exposure to the industry, I'm not talking of the markdown exposure, was only 2,500, 3,000 crore. So 90% reduction in a company which would otherwise go down, and MFs will absolutely exit, without getting any scratch. So we also had a large exposure in Dewan at some point in time in 2016 and 17. Mm-hmm. But then, we were alert enough in exiting and, we left with 10 crore exposure there. It was in thousands of crores. And the story goes on with many of these financiers which came, again, the example of Yes Bank. At some point in time, industry had large exposure in CDs. Of course, it was backstopped by government. But, just before the moratorium was set in, the total amount of exposure to Yes Bank was sort of limited to these perpetuals, and that's about it. And, industry exited pretty much across the board from Yes Bank. So, I mean, I'm calling these guys new financiers, modern is wrong, sorry.
And there be lifeline for the perpetuals just going off track with this discussion.
Come again?
And lifeline for those perpetuals?
No. I mean, perpetual is not a good asset class for the fixed income. It has to find its place in maybe hybrid funds. But for the fixed income, given the binary nature of perpetual, howsoever low probability that they may be, it's not abysmally low. It is at least 1 in 20 chance that, any pub that you're picking up today, could do yes bank to you. And therefore you ought to be careful, in dialing that risk, for 0.5% or 1% extra, it just doesn't make sense. The spreads for the perpetuals have been, but I've been like a broken record, been bearish on this for very long, and it's not blown out. Only recently we saw perpetual spreads sort of blowing up, but otherwise, Indian markets and financiers have been somewhat sanguine about perpetuals far too much relative to our international counterparts, and mispriced them. At least the good news is that investors are getting paid well now. When you buy a private sector bank perpetuals, you get 4% or 4.5% over PSU bonds, which is at least some respectable spread that you're earning. But at these levels, most probably these private banks won't even raise perpetuals.
Now I'll get on to the last question. I think our discussion has been long. I think we have short the time I was earmarked. Kalyan Ashish is asking, I have a lump sum to invest and would need this money exactly after 1 year. Capital protection is of utmost importance. Where should I invest?
So for longer term, I've sort of talked about low duration funds, the short term funds. But if it's a 6-12 month money, low duration is the best bet you have. It's very unlikely to misbehave. It doesn't have, much of credit distress, anywhere in the industry, including Birla Sun Life funds. And it will deliver far better than fixed deposits. It's almost always delivered far better than fixed deposits. So I think, low duration is a good place to sit, for 1 year horizon.
Thank you very much, Manish. I think discussion, somewhere I lost track of time. Thank you very much for talking to us and answering all these questions. Thank you.
My pleasure, Dhiren. Always a pleasure.